This is the Apple's MacBook Air and this is a Linux PC. And today I'm going to compare two of my most used operating systems, both competing against each other in each of these levels, and let us see if we finally have a winner. Before we start, I'm not a daily Mac user, so comment down below some tips and tricks if you're one. Okay, you do get a dock in macOS and something similar in GNOME. It's like a dock, but it isn't. It's a dash. A clever implementation since it isn't visible all the time. And when you press the super key, this is the GNOME activities, clever because it gives this overview of all the apps that are open and the favorite apps which can be opened from the dash. And also double pressing the super key gives you access to all the apps installed. Now Mac has something similar, but there is a separate key to access that, and it is kind of inconvenient. I called up a friend of mine who is a daily Mac user, not exposed to any other desktop operating system. He suggested a hotkey combination, but I feel like it is even more difficult to reach. Like, how do you bridge this big of a gap? You do get the trackpad gestures for both, but I really like using my mouse since my other setups don't have trackpad. There's a top bar in both of the user interfaces. Mac offers this global menu for your open apps. It's kind of annoying, especially when working with an external display. I need to move the mouse quite much before I can click on something. On the right side, you get the control center just like on GNOME, but there's a bit of a difference. Integrated inside the control center are some Apple specific features which I don't really use often, but I do love them. They require a separate section in this video. Mac's control center does complicate things a little bit. For example, you don't get the dark mode or light mode easily. You also don't get turning on the night light or what they call the eye protection, whatever, from the control center itself. You have to dig in a little bit in order to change these simple things. On the other hand, they are quite easily accessible on GNOME. The desktop experience on Linux is much more simpler and easier to use. So yes, I will be giving this point to Linux. Okay, as you all know, the real deal is in the user interface and the user interactions. Mac has a smaller screen and I feel like the software is kind of well adapted for it. Like Maximize on Mac hides the top bar and the dock, while on GNOME the top bar is still visible. I don't use GNOME on small screens, so I don't know what the experience would feel like, but I guess that bar won't make much of a difference. Switching among apps are weird on Mac. The best bet is to rely on gestures, but I just like using the keyboard more since it is much quicker. You can use Command Tab to switch among open windows, but there are two problems which you need to face. First, minimized apps are not unminimized when you try to switch to them, and it's so very frustrating that I have to use the trackpad or the mouse to reopen it. Secondly, if you have multiple instances of an app running, you can't select one particular instance to focus on. Using desktops or workspaces work when you maximize it so that you can use the gestures to switch among the open windows. But you might ask, why not just use them side by side? But then window snapping does not work on Mac. So again, not possible. Does not work would not be completely right because it is actually implemented, but in a weird way. And some of the most used apps or even apps developed by Apple themselves don't support it due to some reason. And not just this, there are so many other things that macOS does not have. For example, closing apps don't close them all the time. They kind of remain open in the background. So you have to manually close them from the dock or use Command Q, which works for me since it is a shortcut. Maximizing by double click on the title bar does not work properly. Instead it does this, which I don't even know if it has any use. I feel like it fits the apps window inside the screen. But again, sometimes it maximizes normally, like in this case. Linux works so much better in this case, whether about minimizing apps, unminimizing them using your keyboard, switching among multiple instances of app using Alt-Tab, which are again neatly grouped with thumbnails. Close actually closes the app whether you use the mouse or the hotkeys. I'll have to give this point to Linux again. 2 versus 0. This is getting interesting. For file management, we get Nautilus on GNOME and I love it. It is the best file manager you can get in the entire Linux universe. It is sleek, modern and beautiful. And it also comes with these small fluid animations inside the app itself, which makes it interesting to use. But more importantly, it is themable, just like any other apps on GNOME. I have a separate section dedicated for this. You can open a directory in a new tab, transfer files between or among them, pin stuff. macOS on the other hand gives you Finder, which is great. Tabs are accessible through Command+T, but most of my file interactions are with the mouse, so having middle click to open in a new tab would have been better in this case. instead of right-clicking to access a menu, then opening it in a new tab. Also, Command+T opens a new tab with the recent files, doesn't matter which directory is already open. You also get this quick view feature, which is a nice addition. I use it very often. It is very convenient. You can just press the spacebar and see all the important directory information, or just quickly view the file. But that doesn't necessarily mean the entire interaction is consistent using the keyboard. You can create new folders with Command-Shift-N, but you can't enter the folder by pressing the Enter key. When you try, it switches to renaming the folder. You can't cut a file from one place and paste it somewhere else. My friend, who is again a daily Mac user, said that this is the biggest problem he faces on his Mac. What he suggested you can do is just drag and drop the file from one place to the other, which kind of acts like a move, or the cut and paste alternative. Both supports native integration with cloud drives inside the file manager, which is a very handy feature for keeping shared files. Absolutely love it. Mac gives you access to Safari. It is a nice browser, very clean user interface, and works very well with my iPad out of the box. I can open a tab which was opened on my Mac and resume my work from there. And I can already sense how good this feature works for people who own an iPhone. Okay, Linux on Fedora comes with Firefox installed. I know it is not what you get on vanilla GNOME, which is GNOME Web, but for this video, let us stick to Firefox. I actually love this browser and a lot of things that comes with it. Like PDF editing, I can easily edit PDFs on Firefox, but I've never used it. Sure, some people might be using it daily, but it's a nice little feature to have. Similarly, you get a lot of sharing options inside Firefox, but again, my phone does not have Firefox installed. I've owned this thing for almost 2 years and I've still not set up it properly to work with Linux or Mac or even Windows. Something that I noticed on my Mac, there are often some delays, and this problem is there from day one. Certain interactions feel a little bit slow. Might be opening an app, switching to a different location inside Finder, or fetching the properties window inside the Finder app. Slight delays leave a bad taste in the user experience. But I'm pretty sure that it is not any performance issue, since video editing, 3D modeling and other heavy loads are handled effortlessly by this laptop. It almost feels like Apple has intentionally included the delays inside the system. Office apps are included out of the box in both. Linux comes with the LibreOffice suite, which is easy to use and looks familiar. Apple has their own Office suite, which I think is a better implementation since they are synced with iCloud. I don't use any of these frequently. I prefer Microsoft Office since that is what we were taught in junior class, but it is still not available on Linux. Mac comes with all the required apps by default. There's a basic video editor, a music composer, note-taking apps and more. So I feel like Mac should be given this point. I know there are some flaws, but again, the integration of apps cross-platform with mobile devices make them more appealing. My Mac won't detect my Android phone when I connect it. I need to install some extensions separately in order to transfer files between my Android and Mac. While for my iPad, the sharing mechanism is pretty neat, if not the best. On Android, you get this direct access to all the required files, but on Apple's mobile devices, you can transfer files only to supported apps. Like here, I transfer something to Chrome and it appears inside the download section. The same goes the other way around. Downloads inside Chrome are available from my Mac here. It's a different approach for me, kind of annoying, but it works. You also get a couple of other options. You can wipe your device, perform system upgrade, and more from here. And the same goes for NTFS formatted drives. My Mac recognizes it and can access all the contents but won't let me write stuff on my pen drive. And this especially was a very big issue when I joined college, because in the 4 of the computer labs we have, all of them have hundreds of iMacs installed, and I just couldn't copy files from the iMac to my pen drive which was formatted in NTFS. I still remember one of my friends telling me that he needs to buy a new pen drive, so I offered him to reformat his drive to FAT32 so that it works on Mac, and we had to go for a hunt throughout the college searching for a Windows PC on which we can work on. This isn't the case on Linux. I can buy any USB device and be sure that it would work on my Linux PC. So yeah, Linux wins this round. Mac has the seamless feel in the operating system, which I can't help but notice. The iPad connects automatically to my Mac and you need not configure anything for that. Mac shares its mouse and keyboard with my iPad, so I need not switch and use my fingers for opening it. And this thing is so cool. I can literally drag a file from my Mac and drop it inside iPad, or do the opposite. It works. It feels like one single device rather than 2 different. Similarly, I can extend my Mac screen to my iPad and use it as a separate monitor, or even mirror screen from my iPad to my Mac. So it's very convenient. AirDrop also works flawlessly. I can easily transfer files from my iPad or from my Mac to the iMacs in college, or do the opposite. When you already have several Apple devices, the barrier among them kind of vanishes magically. Linux does not have this out of the box, at least in GNOME, although you do get KDE Connect out of the box in KDE Plasma, but it isn't this seamless in my day-to-day experience. Easily, Mac wins this round. Mac is very rigid in terms of theming. I mean, yes, you can access the system settings and change a couple of things, but you can't change the overall look and feel of Mac. GNOME, on the other hand, kind of suppresses theming, especially with the GTK4 release, but developers and designers do figure out a way somehow, and it looks beautiful when themed. You can change every aspect of an app by modifying the CSS files. I even created an app which lets you modify GTK themes inside GNOME. It also supports adaptive colors, which changes your current theme colors to adapt to the background. Go and check it out if you use GNOME and you're looking for a modern alternative to GNOME tweaks. Linux wins this round for so much flexibility. On one hand, you pay this considerable amount of money to get your Mac, which pretty much includes the development cost for macOS and all the apps which are bundled with it. Apple is definitely not doing charity. And on the other hand, we have Linux, which is free and gives you this feel that you own something, so you can just match it according to your very unique vibe. Okay, 4 versus 2, so certainly Linux wins the race. Or it doesn't. I'm pretty sure it depends on the user, how well adapted you are to the user interface, which is again evident from the fact that my friend, who is again a daily Mac user, found a really hard time to reply me when I asked him what is the single most difficult thing to do on his Mac in his day-to-day interaction. Now, would his opinion change if he uses Linux or Windows? Don't know, doesn't matter. He loves it, you might love it, and that is fine. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Do like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.